Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. The Divisional Round is in the books. That means we only have 3 games that matter left in this season. But before we dive into the Divisional Round, there are quite a few interesting developments when it comes to coaching. Dennis, 3 head coaching slots have been filled in addition to John Harbaugh going to the Giants, which was official finally. Kevin Stefanski, formerly of your Browns, is now going to the Falcons, where he is apparently keeping the defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, which I thought was fascinating. Former Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley is going to the Miami Dolphins, which seems to have drawn tepid response from fans online. And Robert Saleh, who was once the head coach of the Jets, last season went back to being the defensive coordinator for the 49ers, is now the head coach for the Titans. And honestly, I thought that Titans opening was the worst of the jobs. I don't know if I'm Robert Saleh why I would take that, but apparently both sides were impressed with each other enough to move on. I wasn't wild about any of those coaching hires. I think Stefanski is fine, but he's put himself in another position where he doesn't have a quarterback. But the other 2 didn't really move the needle for me. Did any of those 3 head coaching hires do much for you?
Well, I think Stefanski kind of makes sense for Atlanta. In 18 and 19, he was the offensive coordinator with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. So Cousins goes into next year as the starter. He's still under contract.
Well, that's a big question I have, because they redid his contract so that they could release him. Everybody said the only reason they would make that move is so they could release him and designate him a post-June 1 cut. So I had pretty much considered him gone, and everybody's talking about Stefanski going there because he's familiar with Kirk Cousins. So I don't get it.
Well, have you looked at what the free agent quarterback market is?
Well, Atlanta doesn't seem to care.
I mean, there's as Jim Mora would say, there's diddly poo in the quarterback market.
That's why maybe Stefanski got some guarantees that they're keeping Kirk Cousins, in which case I believe the changes they made will absolutely F their cap in 2026 if they keep him, which probably means no Kyle Pitts coming back. But most people don't think Penix can play in 26 either. I was like, Stefanski just spent the last 4 or 5 years going, I don't have a quarterback and this has screwed my team, and may have gone to a place where he's equally as screwed.
So it's not a great quarterback draft. So they can draft a Cade Klubnik, a Carson Beck, not great options in the draft. Mendoza is probably the one first-round draft pick in this draft. And while there's a ton of hype, he's going to the Raiders at 1, there's also a lot of talk that he's not really worth the number 1 pick. And he could, after the way Ruben Bain played yesterday, he's starting to get buzz. Arvell Reese is starting to get buzz. Maybe the Raiders sell and take a longer term rebuild. But as far as Stefanski goes, I like that Cousins and him have familiarity. Stefanski likes to run a play action, drop back passing offense. He's got Bijan Robinson, who's a fantastic running back, who's going to fit great in an offense like that. Drake London outside. Would it be nice if they had Pitts coming back? Yeah, he had a great year last year, but who knows?
So here's what I was saying about Kirk Cousins, the renegotiation. It dropped his 2026 salary number from 35 million to 2.1 million, but it moved his 2027 salary figure from 35 million to 67.9 million, which becomes fully guaranteed on March 13th, 2026. So if they do not release him prior to the start of the new league year, designated a June 1, if they do that, it's 35 dead this season and something like 12 and a half dead next season. If they don't, his cap hit is only 24.6 this year, but it is 90.4 fully guaranteed. No chance. They're doing that. So, are they going to release him, take the cap hit, and then hope that they can sign him back for like a minimum? Sounds like Cousins wants to go somewhere else anyway.
Well, and maybe Cousins will reconsider because they brought in a new coach.
But... Well, so part of me wonders if this was a last accidental FU from the GM that they just fired, because this redo and everything was right before they cleaned house.
Right.
And perhaps it would have been better to leave a sad situation alone than to have done this, where you've kind of locked yourself into a path. And maybe that was the discussion the old GM had with Raheem Morris, like, hey, we'll free this up so we can get rid of Cousins for you and you can do something else. Right. That kind of ties the hands of whoever. I don't think they've hired a GM yet.
No, Ryan.
But that kind of ties Matt Ryan's hands, and that really ties Kevin Stefanski's hands, though, because if you roll with Kirk Cousins in 2026, you're rolling with a $90.4 million cap hit in 2027. And even if the cap goes up, that is putting you in a really grim situation when it's either London or Robinson becomes the free agent that you have to try to work on. And then you still have Penix that I don't know what you're doing with. That's where I was kind of laughing, because of all the places, Stefanski interviewed with Baltimore where they have, if nothing else, a fairly stable quarterback situation. He interviewed somewhere else where, if nothing else, they had a stable quarterback situation. He goes to Atlanta, where I think one of the biggest questions is Taylor Heineke your starting quarterback, or somebody? I can't remember who their third was. I thought it was Heineke, but is your starting quarterback, because Penix isn't ready and you painted yourself into a corner with Cousins.
Yeah, it's honestly, I won't be surprised if they let him go before March 13th because of the deal. And they may make the determination that they don't really have a choice. And then they go hard to try and re-sign him to a better team-friendly deal. Maybe they, but there's nothing to say that they don't renegotiate next year. If Cousins wants to keep playing and they play well. The defense has played better. I don't hate the re-signing of Ulbrich. Now they spent a ton of draft capital last year on defensive players, and we saw as the year went on, we saw James Pierce and I forget who the other defensive end they drafted, start making plays, really started to be a nuisance to other teams' quarterbacks. So they have a ways to go. You've got a couple anchor pieces with those defensive linemen and a couple offensive anchor pieces with Bijan and Drake London. They have to continue to keep their O-line going, and it could be one of those FUs from the other coach or other the old GM.
Well, I don't think it's like an intentional one, because I think Atlanta was a situation where we were mildly surprised they cleaned house, because it seemed like they had done well enough at the end that they were
Yeah,
safe for a year.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that's the kind of move you make if you have a grand plan in mind. But it's the kind of move you make when you have a grand plan that somebody else inherits and is like, well,
What
I
the
mean,
hell were they thinking?
I get what you're saying about like a future renegotiation with Cousins, but then it feels like you've just turned yourself into the Saints salary cap hell that they're still trying to claw their way out of by pushing years of bad contracts further and further into the future. And it seemed like Cousins didn't want to be there anymore either. Whether a Stefanski hire changes that mindset or not, I feel I part of me wonders, like, if you're the owner and you were mulling cleaning house, should you have let the other administration make a kind of massive future move like that? Because you don't know how your incoming coach or GM is going to feel, or how they might want to handle something, or if Cousins wasn't having a good experience with Raheem Morris and also wanted out, does that change now with getting an offensive coordinator he might like better?
So, do you think Stefanski's had his agent go, hey, just for shits and giggles, why don't you give Terry Pagula a call up in Buffalo just to see, because we saw years and years and years ago, Bill Belichick accepted the New York Jets job, and then a couple days later said no. Josh McDaniel did it to
and that's why
Indianapolis.
Stefanski, if I was him, I'd be looking for better ownership, which I think Atlanta probably has a better, more conscientious owner than Cleveland. Not to cast aspersions, but the other thing is I'd be looking for some place where I had some kind of stable option I could work with at quarterback, and that's where, for a guy who's spent the last, I guess, 3 years, they've had Watson, or 4. Time flies when you're having fun. In QB purgatory, that would have been like a deal breaker for me. And I don't know that got any better. But, Halfley definitely has his own QB purgatory, because Tua's another contract that either it's going to break their cap or they keep him on the roster. And that's not too appealing.
Yeah,
Robert Saleh allegedly has a quarterback in Tennessee. I'm not as sold on Cam Ward as some other people, but I think that roster is terrible. And that would give me pause about that ownership group, which seems to be alternating between firing a GM and a coach every other year.
Yeah.
I don't know how stable I'd feel going into that. And when you're going on your second opportunity after not having a successful first opportunity, that's kind of your make or break opportunity. We've seen a lot of guys go back to being coordinators and be very discerning about where they were going to go ahead and make that leap. I, for the life of me, can't see what about Tennessee would have been that appealing, because I think Saleh was in a good position in San Francisco as the DC.
Yeah, I do think he had, he is a really good defensive coordinator. I think the Jeff Halfley hiring, there was some talk about how well the Packers defense had played. They were the 11th ranked defense this year. Halfley spent most of his coaching career as a defensive backs coach. He was a co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State for 1 year. And then he took the Boston College job, which basically lasted one contract. And they were like, yeah, we've had enough of you as a head coach. And then he had 2 years as the defensive coordinator in Green Bay. It was kind of like their offense. Yeah, they're all right. They're not bad.
They exist.
You're not looking around going, well, and granted, he lost Micah Parsons this year. They made that big trade. Then Parsons got injured. I'm curious to see. There was a blurb out today on Roto World, and I forget who the original blurber was, that the expectation was Halfley was going to be looking at Green Bay free agents real close, and the nod to that was Malik Willis. And so, we know that Miami's got to do something at quarterback. And maybe Halfley comes in as like, yeah, I'm just going to keep rolling with Tua. And, I think I can find me an OC that can make it work. But maybe he goes after Willis. I don't think, Willis played all right at times, but he didn't, when he had his opportunity, him and Trey Lance both, Willis performed better than Lance, but it wasn't like he came out and made me go, somebody's got to just give him a starting job. So, because Miami can't necessarily dump Tua, maybe it is we're going to bring you in and you're going to compete, wink, wink.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll see how it goes. It'll be interesting. Also interesting, we got one offensive coordinator hiring. Drew Petzing, who was with the Arizona Cardinals, comes in as the offensive coordinator in Detroit. After some of the names that had been thrown out, I wasn't incredibly excited about that. I don't know if you feel different.
No, I don't. I was quite underwhelmed. He was the quarterback coach in Cleveland in 22, which was 11 games of Jacoby Brissett and 6 games of Deshaun Watson. So there was it was that things were bad all around in Cleveland. Then he went to Arizona.
Speaking of 11 games of Jacoby Brissett,
his offense the last 3 years ranked 23rd, 12th, 23rd again. When they were 12th, it was on the back of James Conner. They didn't have Conner this year. Marvin Harrison the last couple seasons has not fulfilled his potential. Kyler Murray, I'm not going to kick a guy for having to put up with Kyler Murray as his quarterback. I don't think that's a good situation. But I don't know. I guess how I'm selling it to myself is that I wasn't high on the Dan Campbell hiring, and I was admittedly wrong. Now, the difference being Dan Campbell came in like a fistful of chili peppers, and I thought that ain't going to work in the NFL. Drew Petzing comes in like a fistful of sour cream, and I'm like, that looks like it's going to be just so bland and boring. And how can you do that to Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown? Now, on the other side of the equation, he'll get Sam Laporta back, and he did great things with Trey McBride. So it could end up being okay.
Yeah, it's hard to judge his running game in Arizona exactly, because when James Conner was healthy, it actually looked pretty good. And I would say James Conner is not as good as either of the two that Detroit has. But yeah, my hope would be for Sam Laporta too.
I don't know. I think his last couple of years when he played, he might have been as good as this year's David Montgomery.
Mike McDaniel withdrew his name from consideration in Cleveland, which makes sense. Seems like he is lining up to be the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, which could be fun for that group.
I didn't know if it was like he felt like if you had a chance to be a head coach, does he feel like he's got an in there, or is he like, I'm going to go take it easy for a couple seasons? I got Baker Mayfield there with, Emeka Ibuka and that stable of running backs and Chris Godwin.
Well, again, if you're doing your second shot, I would say he's in a situation too where he would be looking for
anywhere but Cleveland.
Stable ownership and some kind of a clear-cut quarterback situation, and that's not Cleveland.
Well, the hard part is going forward that very few available coaching situations are going to have stable quarterback situations.
I know, but again, there is no harm. We've seen some of these coordinators who've gone back to being a coordinator in a good situation, having success, and then being able to pick a spot instead of just panicking and taking a spot
Right.
because there are a lot available. And honestly, if I'm McDaniel, I might be more interested in Buffalo because he's always liked to run heavy offense, and they have a killer running back and a killer quarterback. So that would be, if I was looking at openings. Arizona probably has more talent to work with. They have a quarterback question, unless you think that you can rehab Kyler Murray. But they're, of the openings, the Raiders have some pieces and they have the number one overall pick. I don't know how incredible I feel about that situation, but I mean, I would have taken any of those jobs over Tennessee, though. So we've gone off the board for me because they were the last place option for me, both looking at roster and situation and everything else. Because I think you're kind of married to Cam Ward, and he wasn't in a great situation last year, so you don't know for sure. But also there were some questions, as we talked about before, when he was coming out, small sample size, how was he going to adjust to the NFL? I don't think any of those questions got answered by the 2025 season in Tennessee.
I'd agree.
Speaking of the Bills, we will jump into our wildcard weekend recap. The first game, the number 1 seed Denver Broncos scored 33. The Bills scored 30 in overtime. The Broncos will advance, but this was a game where both teams may have eliminated each other. We will talk about the Broncos' woes in a minute, but first, Josh Allen, very visibly upset afterward, took a lot of blame for this. Did not have a spectacular game, although, that second interception was just a heck of a play on defense. He wasn't getting a ton of support. Sean McDermott takes the fall, basically, for Buffalo not being able to get to a Super Bowl. I was kind of surprised that he was fired on Monday and that their GM, who I think has not created the greatest roster, is still there. But what do you think this game does to Josh Allen's legacy, and were you surprised by what happened to McDermott?
I think I was surprised with McDermott getting the axe. Him and Schoen, or not Schoen, Bean were kind of a team. McDermott came in, had a good draft his first year, and then recommended Bean as the GM candidate, and they brought him in, and it seems like, he just, is A2 Brutus kind of situation here. There was a report out I saw yesterday, I think, that in the post-defeat meeting that Pagula and Bean and McDermott had, McDermott, I don't want to say it wasn't characterized as, he got in their faces and basically blamed it on, you built me a shit receiving core. But he basically said, here are our weaknesses, and we need to do better. You can't expect Josh to always, lift you out of it if you're not going to give us an elite receiver. And among other things, that didn't go over well, I guess. And so that was why they decided, one of the reasons that they decided to let him go. But McDermott kind of is suffering a little bit from Marty Schottenheimer syndrome right now. Schottenheimer he could get to the NFC Championship game. He could get deep in the playoffs, going to have a winning record, and he just could never win the Super Bowl, couldn't get to the Super Bowl. And at some point, you got to go, thank you for your service, Tony Dungy, and bring in John Gruden. It's just one of those situations where it's not great. I think McDermott is a very good coach. He's a guy that's got a plan. And I think ultimately this last couple seasons, he wasn't getting what he wanted from Billy Bean, or I think it's Billy Bean, and
Brandon Bean.
And Billy Bean's a baseball guy. He wasn't getting what he wanted from Brandon Bean, i.e., I need you to give me legitimate ace receiver, and that frustration apparently reared its head, and it resulted in him getting his walking papers. I think McDermott will, it's wild when you look, McDermott and Harbaugh and Stefanski, I think, are all very, very, very good head coaches. And for them to all be on the market, and Mike Tomlin as well, to all be out there and available in this cycle. I mean, 30% of the teams, 32% of the NFL teams turned over their coaches this year. I saw a thing the other day, and it was, I think 2022 was the last time it happened, and only one, maybe two of the 10 coaches hired that cycle are still with their teams this year. I don't know. I think that Josh Allen's early legacy is going to be tied to Sean McDermott. They're going to bring a good coach in. What's that going to do for Josh Allen? Are they going to give Allen his elite receiver? Are they going to be able to build the defense to be able to hold up? There have been some issues on the defensive side of the ball. That's really going to be the question, and we won't know until Buffalo makes those decisions. So for me, I don't, Josh Allen's 29 years old now? Been in the league 7 years or something.
I think he's 28. No, you're right, 29.
So I don't think we're at what's his legacy point of his career yet. You got to win some big ones, though. You can't just keep getting knocked out in the second, third round of the playoffs.
This was his 8th season. And I think part of it is just the not being able to make a Super Bowl. We've seen that happen for a few good quarterbacks before. A lot of people said this was his year just because there was no Mahomes, no Lamar. But as a 6th seed on the road, you were a 6th seed because you had some flaws on your team, and I think that's what ends up getting them here in the playoffs. The Broncos, meanwhile, they won. They will host the AFC Championship game, but they'll do it without their quarterback, Bo Nix, breaking a bone in his ankle near the end of overtime. He will have surgery. I believe he had surgery today, and he is out for the season. So now it is Jarrett Stidham, who last threw a regular season pass during the 2023 season, who will be starting. What do we make of this development for Denver, who is now 5.5-point underdogs at home?
Stidham has started 4 games in his career. He's 29 years old. It's I'd like, it's cool to want to go, oh, well, remember what Nick Foles did? But no, Foles played substantially more football than Jarrett Stidham has. You got a puncher's chance. You have an exceptional defense, good receiving group with Cortland Sutton and Pat Bryant. R.J. Harvey's been playing really well, and McLaughlin didn't look too bad last week either. But it's going to be a challenge. New England has a very, very good team. It's one of those situations where Jarrett Stidham really doesn't have anything to lose. Do you know if he's under contract next year, or is he a free agent?
Jarrett Stidham, I believe, is a free agent.
So it's like for him, he just needs to go out there and just, I don't want to say play YOLO ball, but like, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's going to be a backup making, $2 million for somebody else next year. I mean, that's kind of where the quarterback situation is. He's still going to be very employable. If he plays well and they lose, maybe he gets a Malik Willis kind of shot finally at 30 years old to come in and compete.
I was wrong. He signed a 2-year deal this offseason, so he has 1 more year next year.
All right. So, well, he'll be backing up Bo then next year.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It was definitely a blow after being excited to win and advance. It's going to be interesting.
Because when it happened, you didn't see anything. It was like
No,
he got up and he walked the
it
field.
was when you sent when you sent me a text, I was just kicking back, relaxing after a stressful 4 hours, watching the 49ers implode. And I'm like, what? And then I started looking, I'm like, oh my God. And I think it was kind of like that for Denver too, because I had seen some of the beat report of the initial interviews uh, with Sean Payton, because he had come out the first time and talked about the game and all that. He had to come back out a second time because when you watch the clip, he's like, "Yeah, I like you guys so much. I decided to come back. Oh no, we had an update. I wanted to get out there." I'm like, "Oh my God." Because at first I thought this has got to be fake. Apparently, I wasn't the only one. Apparently, Peyton Manning saw that headline and called people he still knows in Denver's front office to ask if it was real.
Well, it flashed on my phone, and then before I could tap it and open it up and see, it kind of disintegrated. And I'm like, "Oh shit, where are my alerts?" I'm like looking, and I couldn't find it. And I
know the fantasy sites aren't really putting out alerts right now, which is where we get a lot of things because it doesn't matter as much. But well, the other Saturday game, the Seahawks came ready to play. The 49ers did not look ready to play. A 41-6 walk away for Seattle. So for the 49ers, I think we've talked about injuries and inefficiency. I think a big question for me is their wide receiver room going forward. Seems like Brandon Ayuk, who did not play this year, has worn out his welcome with the team. Feels pretty certain they're going to move on from him. Juwan Jennings, who was probably their best receiver, is a free agent. What do you think the 49ers are going to do at receiver this offseason?
Yeah, I wish I knew more about the Brandon Ayuk situation because he went full Eric Cartman. Like, screw you guys.
Kind of like Joe Mixon, except for we knew more about the injury to Ayuk, but it went from, he's on track, he'll probably start on PUP, but we expect him midseason. Then midseason rolled around, he's not looking ready. And then all these rumors about dissension in the background came out. He unfollowed the team on social media, and then they're like, well, he's not going to be healthy enough to come back. Is he really not healthy enough? Because sure seems like something else.
Yeah, it almost is like he's not going to be healthy enough to come back because him and somebody else on the team are not getting along, and he shows back up at practice, he's going to get his ass beat.
That was certainly the vibe they gave off. So, I mean, I would be shocked if he's on the roster in March.
Like, was he DMing Olivia Culpo or something? I don't know, man.
I don't know. The two weirdest situations for which you don't really have much insight, the number one is Joe Mixon, which I don't know if we're ever going to know what happened there. That was it was mildly surprising that he was not ready to go for the season because there wasn't really any talk about it during the preseason, and then he just never came back. And the Texans spent most of the year pretending they'd never heard of him. And so I don't know what happened there. But the second most is Brandon Ayuk, which went from they needed him so much they gave him a huge contract extension right at the 11th hour last offseason. Didn't look great during the season, then got hurt and missed. When they shipped Debo off this offseason, it seemed like they were doubling down on Ayuk's our man with Pearsall and Jennings, and now he's never going to play another down for them.
Yeah, they have a situation going on at wide receiver. Now, Pearsall has not proven himself to be reliable at all. They've got what? Then DeMarcus Robinson is their other top receiver. The free agent group, you've got Christian Kirk. Hey, Debo's a free agent. De'Ami Brown and Rashid Shaheed. Here's an interesting one. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. That might be interesting. Then Wan'Dale Robinson's a free agent. Depending on what you're looking for. John Mechie flashed a little bit. He's a free agent. George Pickens. What kind of swings are they going to take? It feels like Pickens is going to get franchise tagged, but.
Well, it just feels like wide receiver went from being a source of depth and strength to one of the most glaring weaknesses for the team.
So here's the most San Francisco 49ers free agent signing of all. Romeo Doubs is a free agent. He feels like he would slide right in there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. They're definitely going to have some work to do. Also, some interesting tidings for the Seahawks. Zach Charbonnet tore his ACL. He's done for the year. That would probably, given where it happened, be a major setback going into 2026 as well. I had kind of felt like they were trending toward letting Ken Walker go this offseason. It felt like they were trending toward letting him go. He was great on Saturday night and could be real necessary in 2026. So, what do you think the loss of Charbonnet means for the championship game and moving forward?
Well, based on the way Ken Walker produced last week, I think it looks good. That being said, who is it they're playing? The Rams. Yep. The one of the areas that the free agent market was pretty strong is going to be pretty strong in 26 is the running back group. It's, we've talked a lot about as the season wore on that there looked like there was going to be some players to be had. That being said, I don't know. You watch what Walker can do when you give him the ball. I think ultimately it comes down to, does Seattle think Walker can stay healthy enough? And I think that's really been the rub with him is, like, can he stay healthy enough to play 17 games as the lead back? He's not a super big guy. He's one of those 5'9", 5'10", 208, 209 pounders, which is pretty good size, but he isn't like Charbonnet, who was 6 foot 230. Super explosive, competent pass catcher. They've got their third back, George Holani, who flashed a little bit early in the season and preseason, and when given an opportunity via injuries in season before he himself got injured, Holani looked pretty good. But they're all three of them going into free agency. So I'm not sure what Seattle's going to do. They traded for Shaheed. He's going to be a free agent. You've got JSN. They traded for Cooper Kupp, who I don't think Kupp is going to be did they trade for Kupp or they signed him as a free agent?
They signed him as a free agent.
To a 1-year deal or longer?
Longer.
Okay. So he'll be back, but he arguably the tank is running dry there. He has his moments, but he's not producing those big games, game after game after game anymore. And honestly, with JSN there, you don't really need to. I think AJ Barner has established himself as the tight end, and they like Elijah Arroyo, their backup tight end who's been out with injury. So they have some good parts. They're going to need to lock down, I think, a solid number 2. I think Cooper Kupp at this stage of his career is a great third wide receiver. Let's give a compliment a la Rashid Shaheed to JSN, and let's see where that goes. And then they've got, I don't know if their plan is to draft running backs and try to rebuild it there. It is a good free agent class. But
I could have seen drafting one to pair with Charbonnet, but I think tearing your ACL into January, hard to imagine he's a player that doesn't end up on PUP to start the season. I don't know if you want to go from having 2 great running backs to starting over at the position next year.
So with Charbonnet, then, since he's going to be a free agent, but he's injured, he'll automatically revert to PUP.
He wasn't going to become a free agent. Charbonnet was drafted after, so they have him under contract going forward. Walker is the one that was taken before in the second round. His contract expires at the end of this season. And that's why I thought, they had been leaning on Charbonnet in key moments, red zone, 2-minute drill. I thought they were trending toward Ken Walker's probably more replaceable. We're going to let him go. We're going to keep Charbonnet. And then I could see you draft and add a running back. But Charbonnet is the one you already have, and with where that ACL is torn, I just can't fathom him being ready to go week 1, which means you would go from 2 guys that you were familiar with to, if you don't bring Walker back, neither are available. I don't know, I'd start over again. That makes me wonder if they will try now harder to keep Walker.
Well, if let's say they decide, we know Charbonnet is probably going to not be at full strength for half a season. If they re-sign Walker, he's not going to take a 1-year deal. He's going to want a 3-year deal. So now that means let's go look at the free agent market. You got Tyler Algier, somebody you could bring in, Chris Rodriguez, Emmanuel Wilson, who are some other? Brian Robinson, Rashad White. These guys, they feel like guys that could be starters or they could be number 2s who start the beginning of the year, and then as the season goes on and Charbonnet gets healthy, you can then move him to the back burner. Jerome Ford's out there, Kenneth Gainwell. Those guys feel like players you could bring in as bridge backs that you could sign for a year, maybe 2 years, that you can get out of after 1 year if you wanted.
Yeah, and maybe that's the way they'll go. To me, it makes it more of an interesting situation because of the injury and who got hurt. The Sunday games, the first of them was an ugly affair in New England. Both teams were a little bit sloppy. The Patriots getting the 28-16 victory over the Houston Texans. Dennis, you'd be hard-pressed to find a quarterback that had 2 worse playoff games back-to-back than C.J. Stroud, who ends up with 5 interceptions and 5 fumbles over the course of 2 games. I don't know how to feel about him. He was incredible his rookie year, maybe, coming a little out of nowhere, seemed to lift the Texans. He's been okay the last 2 years during the regular season, but not incredible. And this was just a terrible postseason. How are you feeling about Stroud going into kind of a pivotal 4th year?
So for me, as I look going into next year, he's a guy that I'm willing to buy cheap as my 2nd or 3rd quarterback for fantasy, because he's at that point where he's shown he can be pretty good. Nico Collins was in and out of the lineup. Christian Kirk was in and out of the lineup. They didn't have much of a running game. While the sacks have gone from 38 his rookie year, 52 last year, all the way down to 23 this year. He had a career-high 64.5 completion percentage this year. He did get pressured quite a lot still, even with only taking 23 sacks. That being said, I'm willing to buy into him continuing to develop. I'm probably more nervous about how fast will they sour on D'Amico Ryans, or what's his OC's name, Nick Caley or something Caley? Because they had Bobby Slowick for the first 2 seasons, and
Nick Caley. And it says D'Amico Ryans is non-committal on his status.
Well, I think because D'Amico's not going to commit until he talks to John McClain or whoever the hell, I forget what the owner's name is. I think McClain actually used to be a writer there. I think
it's Cal McNair.
Cal McNair. And so I'm sure D'Amico wants to make sure McNair's on board and basically say, if you're on board, I'm on board. Let's get it done, because we've seen he can be good. And bringing back next year, they've got Nick. So you should be able to go into next year with a healthy Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Noel, and Xavier Hutchinson as your 4th. I think Kirk probably walks in free agency. Maybe not. Dalton Schultz is starting to get old.
Well,
they need a running back.
You might have Tank Dell back.
Yeah,
he was kind of a medical redshirt. You don't know what you get, but when he's been on the field,
you get him for 2 or 3 weeks till he breaks again.
2 or 3 weeks to help CJ Stroud.
They need to beef up their O-line a little more, and they need to have a bona fide stud running back. I don't know that Woody Marks is that. I think Woody Marks is a strong receiving back, a strong second back, but I'm just not sure that I can count on. I mean, we saw it. He had his first 100-yard game 2 weeks ago, and then this week he crapped the bed against.
Well, that's part of what makes me want to know more about Joe Mixon, because he's under contract for next year, but the dead cap hit is only $2 million to release him. So, was it an injury? Was it Nick Caserio, their GM, said a whole lot of nothing when he was talking about him, other than to convey that he wasn't coming back. But that remains a big question. Do they go try to get a free agent? Because that was part of the reason they went and got Mixon in 2024, as they really felt like they needed to beef up the running back room. And I think he really added a lot on the field in 2024, and that might have been some of what they were missing last year. But a lot of questions. CJ Stroud, I think, has gotten a pass a little bit during the last 2 regular seasons because of how good he looked in his first year and because the Texans were still winning. But this was a pretty bad postseason, and I think I would like to see some more signs of growth there. I would be shocked if they didn't pick up his 5th-year option this offseason, which they would have to make a decision on. But if he wants to earn that second contract, if you're going to build around him and build your team around him, I would want to see a little bit more than what we saw this postseason. For the Patriots, obviously they get the win. Wasn't a beautiful game from them, but none of their games have been. They are heavy favorites now to win the AFC and go to the Super Bowl. Should they be?
Probably, when you lose your starting quarterback that's played pretty well over the last couple seasons, and you're going with a guy with 4 career starts and 7 NFL seasons, you should probably expect to win. New England's got a good defense, really strong running game, pretty good offensive line, quarterback that was vying for MVP. That they're developing at wide receiver. I don't know how they can watch Kayshon Boutte make plays week after week like he does and still go, oh, we should only give him 4 targets or 2 targets. Give that man his 10 targets every week, damn it.
You're talking like somebody who hasn't watched Josh McDaniels call offense for the last 20 years.
No, I had this, and I thought I was going to go 4 for 4. My teams for this week that I had picked it in preseason, when I went back and looked, I had Denver versus New England and Seattle versus Chicago. And I thought Chicago was going to pull it off, but they didn't. I don't know. New England is just one of those teams right now. They play to win. They don't care if it's ugly. They don't care if they got to get down and scramble, whatever. They're going to do whatever they have to do to win. That's Mike Vrabel's personality. It goes back to when he was a player. And so, yeah, I think right now they would be the favorite in the AFC pretty comfortably. That being said, Denver has a puncher's chance. That's why you play the game.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense they're favored. I need to think about it a little bit more. It was certainly a blow, losing Knicks, but it's like we've said since the playoffs began. All of the teams that made the playoffs had some positive things, but all of them had flaws. We don't have any super teams, and I think that's going to make this weekend pretty interesting. And that's certainly the case in our last game, the Rams. managing to pull it out in overtime was interesting. Both of the overtime games saw the team that won get the kickoff, do nothing on their first possession, and use a second possession turnover to turn the tide of the game. That's what happened for the Rams. The Bears had an incredible play to tie it in regulation. Rams did nothing with the opening possession of overtime. The Bears looked like they were driving down. Caleb Williams, DJ Moore not on the same page. Cam Curl gets the interception, and the Rams do just enough to go down and get the field goal. They win 20-17. They will advance to the NFC Championship game against Seattle. How do you feel about the Rams facing a pretty suffocating Seahawks defense?
So they split during the regular season, with the Rams winning in Seattle and Seattle winning in LA. I think they're two very well matched teams. The Rams have a good defense, above average defense, though they're not like world beaters like they were in the Aaron Donald days. We've seen Jared Verse play at a very high level, and that defensive line does put pressure on the quarterback. And we know that that's Sam Darnold's Achilles heel is pressure in his face, lots of pressure. I think that the Rams, you've got Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams and Matthew Stafford not afraid to throw the ball to him in any situation. It doesn't matter how many guys are covering them. They still believe, they being Nacua, Adams, and Stafford, that they're open. That's what they do. And then a solid running game. Blake Corum provides a little more pop. Kyron Williams is a little bit steadier. Though I think Corum got banged up a little bit last week. Though, the Rams have a good all-around team. They're top third, I think, in just about everything. And Stafford led the league in passing. Big Stafford fan going back to his time in Detroit. I'd feel a lot more comfortable, honestly, if the Rams had lost both games to Seattle, because then it feels like, this is the kind of matchup it's hard to win three times in 1 year. Well, they split. Now is Kenneth Walker going to fall into the bounce everything outside trap and get spread wide by Nate Landman and keep getting run down before he can get upfield and put the Seahawks behind the chains a little bit? It's going to be it's definitely the game that is more evenly matched. Two teams that know each other very, very well. They play twice every year, so it isn't. There's no secrets here. This is just two guys. I wish I could remember their names. There's this old MMA video of this guy who looked like Tom Selleck and this Japanese guy, and they just walk out and they just spend until the fight is over, which it didn't go all the way. They're just throwing haymakers at each other, and that's kind of what this game feels like. I think the Selleck-looking guy's name is Ken something, but it feels like that's what's going to happen. They're going to come out, they're going to just throw haymakers at each other and grind it out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a heck of a game. For the Bears, pretty successful first season for Ben Johnson. They won the division, ended up the 2 seed. They were right in it till the end, and I think this game really typified the Caleb Williams experience. You had the highest of highs and sometimes the lowest of lows. I thought he had a pretty solid first season with Ben Johnson. I think there is something there. Obviously, we've talked about completion percentage, making fewer huge turnovers would help. But what do you think of Caleb Williams in his first season with Ben Johnson?
I think it was kind of phenomenal. It's very much, you've got an aggressive coach that's willing to take some chances, but also is trying to play smart. And you've got a quarterback that, if you go back and listen to us talk about the Bears over the course of this season, the word that keeps coming up with me is chaos. Caleb Williams, he's Captain Chaos. That's what he does. And you saw it on that last touchdown against the Rams. For him to basically give 20 yards up trying to avoid the rush and throw the ball 45 yards from his back foot into the back corner of the end zone for a touchdown to Cole Kmet was an unbelievable play. That being said, him and DJ Moore got to be on the same page. There's no excuse for that interception at the end of the game. They should have had that play. And for Williams, there were two receivers on that side of the field, and he basically threw the ball between them, and the one that the only guy there to catch the ball was a defender. So you've got to kind of nail some of that down. That being said, the defense is playing well for Dennis Allen. Could they use another playmaker? You can always use another playmaker. The offensive line gelled. They brought in some veterans. They had some injuries here late in the season. They did the Kansas City exactly what KC did last year. Kicked Joe Thuney from guard out to tackle. He played okay. They need to probably bring in at least one more stud O-lineman. Are they going to keep DeAndre Swift and keep him paired with Kyle Monangai? Two good tight ends with Kmet and Loveland. It kind of sucked losing Loveland to the concussion. I think he really blossomed as the season went on. Keenan Allen, he's gone. Who am I thinking? Romo Dunze and DJ Moore and Luther Burden make for a nice trio. But I think DJ Moore's contract, based on the way they used him, kind of makes it untenable. If he's not going to get the lion's share of the targets, it's hard to justify paying him what they are.
Swift is under contract in 2026. They could get out of it. It's not a huge dead cap number, but it's not a huge cap hit either. It would actually be less than it was this year. So
it was wild. Everybody's like, oh, Ben Johnson hates DeAndre Swift. He's going to get rid of him. And he turned out to hate DJ Moore.
Yeah. Well, who knew? Well, that'll do it for us today. We will be back on Thursday talking about the championship games. I'm going to have to pull myself together and see what kind of a pick I can make for the AFC championship game. But if you're looking for something to fill that void in your life between now and then, what can the people do?
Cruise on over to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search button, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like, help us out.
Or if you're a Raiders fan, just start making some fan fiction with Fernando Mendoza. Your time is coming shortly. We'll be back on Thursday. Hope you guys have a wonderful week and stay warm out there.